Why do we want to change our minds? Why do we care about the phrases that we're using, the language that we're using? Who cares? Are the words that we use actually that important in the decisions that we're making, the way that we're moving forward in life, the way that we think about the past, the way that we think about possibilities in the future? Does our language actually matter? There are whole degrees that are dedicated to the study of rhetoric, the study of linguistics, the study of how our language impacts our behavior and how we think about the world, how we think about ourselves, how we think about what's possible. So, when we talk about is language important, are the words that we use important in all aspects of our life? The answer is a resounding yes. Our language is incredibly important. Not only the language that we use to communicate to other people, our ideas, our feelings, our needs, but also the communication that is always running back and forth between our conscious and our subconscious minds. The language that we use has an impact on how we feel. It has an impact on how we behave. It has an impact on our bodily systems, our internal bodily systems. Our language really matters. Now, many self-help books I see tend to lean heavily to one side or the other, where on one side you have the awareness piece, like authors will bring to your attention areas that you can change and improve in your life, and not have a lot of things to say about how to actually do that. And then I see other authors and other teachers who lean heavily on the habit side of the things and the system side of things, and they don't really talk about why it's important. Why do we want to actually change, and to teach us tools to take that first step of bringing true self-awareness and an understanding of how our habits really impact how we show up in the world. So I want to address both sides of the spectrum. So I want to talk first about the 4 phrases that we should, as quickly as possible, excavate from our vocabulary, that we need to dig out of our vocabulary because they're not doing us really any favors. And then I want to talk about how we actually do that. How do we actually change our minds? How do we not just have the awareness of what we want to change, but how do we actually implement change? So those are the two places that I'm going to go today on this particular episode. So I want to share with you 4 phrases that we can remove from our vocabularies, and then also talk about the energetics behind them and why these phrases can impact us negatively. So the 4 phrases are: I'm trying. Number 2, I shouldn't. Number 3, I can't. Number 4, I don't have time. So I'm trying, I shouldn't, I can't, I don't have time. The first one, I'm trying. So there's a difference in the way that we use this phrase in English. One of the ways is when we are, we're at Target and we get a bunch of clothes and we go to a dressing room and we're going to try the clothes on. Or we go to a restaurant and we order a sampler because we're going to try many different foods. That's not the way that I'm talking about using this phrase. So in that sense, that's actually the way that I want to think about how to change our language in this other sense. So the other way that we often use this is we say things like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. I'm trying to make this decision. I'm trying. Do you understand the difference here between actually doing something, and we're using the trying as like, I am actually trying this out right now, I'm experimenting with it, versus this trying that actually is a word that we would use instead of like, I'm ruminating on this problem, or I'm floundering in making this decision. I am putting a lot of mental effort in towards this choice. That's the trying that I'm saying that we can get rid of in our vocabulary. Because as Yoda says, do or do not, there is no try. There actually, in that sense, there really isn't any trying that moves us forward in any meaningful way. Oftentimes we use that phrase to just vocalize indecision. We vocalize being in this perpetual state of ambivalence or sitting on the fence and not being able to make a decision one way or the other. So we say that we're trying because we want to somehow communicate that we feel like all the thinking that we're doing about it is effort. And it's not. It's not effort in the sense of being able to really make any true progress towards something. The effort that comes with the phrase, I'm trying to make a decision, is these swirly thoughts that we get in where it's really just indicative of us trying to avoid failure by coming up with all of the things that could go wrong, or trying to worry ourselves into making a right decision. And really what ends up happening is that we make no decision at all very frequently, or we make the decision way later than we really could have if we had just trusted ourselves. So that's the first phase, is I'm trying. The second phrase is I shouldn't. I don't know how often you heard this growing up, but I do think that all of us have come into adulthood with a pretty clear set of shoulds and shouldn'ts. My dad used to say, don't should on yourself, which I love that phrase so much. You know, it's like, oh man, I should have gone to bed earlier. Oh, I should have taken a right turn instead of a left turn. I shouldn't have eaten that. I should have gone and worked out. The way that you can do this instead, because what that phrase does, I shouldn't, is it makes ourselves believe that there is a really clear set of rules that we should follow. A really clear set of ideals that should be ours, a really clear set of parameters that we are going to operate within. So this would be, I mean, one of the things that like I've had to navigate, especially in the last several years, is what a good mother should do, what a good wife should do, what a good Christian should do. And as I have gone through many, many times of having to unlayer parts of my identity that I thought were just part of me, but I realized were these boxes that had been created for me of rules that came with this phrase, should. It made me believe that any ideas that I had that were outside of that box were bad. So shoulds will always make us believe that there's something wrong with us. Shoulds will always make us believe that there is something more that we are supposed to do that we're not, or a way that we're supposed to behave that we're not behaving. And the shoulds keep us thinking in a very narrow way. What you can replace the shoulds with is I could. So I'll do this even when I have been staying up way too late, scrolling on my phone, and I will say, oh man, I should have gone to bed an hour ago. I have replaced that, have been mindful to replace that phrasing with, I could have gone to bed an hour ago. I could have gone to bed an hour ago. I didn't, but I could have. Immediately what that does is it helps me not force myself into this perfectionist kind of mentality. It helps me realize that I'm a free agent, that there's no should have gone to bed earlier. I could have gone to bed earlier, and that introduces choice again. That I can choose to do things differently because there really are no objective rules. We really have to navigate life through being aware of our intuition, our intention, and what our deepest needs are. Every relationship is different. Every business is different. And there are obviously there's advice about what works well based on being able to observe results, but there are really no clear set of rules for how things are supposed to go. So that's the second one. I shouldn't. You can replace it with I could. I could have. So number 3 is I can't. I can't do that thing. I can't go back to school. I can't start a business. I can't. What I want to suggest that you can replace that with is I won't. I won't go back to school. I won't start a business. What that's bringing to you is this awareness that you really do have choice. Anytime that we say, I can't, it makes us feel very powerless. So I want you to replace that with, I won't. Number 4, I don't have time. This is a big one for me. And truthfully, when I started noticing this and changed this a handful of years ago, I started to view my time differently, how I was spending my time differently. A really obvious way that this showed up is like when I would be late to something, I wouldn't give all the standard excuses of like, oh, the traffic, or I'm sorry I'm late. I couldn't get out of bed, or it was taking forever to get the kids ready, or whatever. I will say, I'm sorry I didn't manage my time well. So it didn't become about whether or not I had enough time. It really has to do with what choices am I making with the time that I do have? Am I being intentional about the choices that I'm making? Am I having good foresight about the time that I have and the choices that I'm making within the time that I have? Am I being aware of the ways that I kind of sabotage my own choices around the time that I have? I don't have time. What I want to recommend that you replace that with is I won't make time, or I'm choosing something else to do with my time. So when someone comes to you and they say, "Oh, can you help out with this thing?" or "Can you, can you do you want to come to this activity, or do you want to take on this new client?" Instead of saying, "I don't have time," the truth is you don't want to make time. And that's okay. You have other things that are a priority, or you just don't want to do that thing. I think some of these phrases that we can, take out of our vocabulary really come down with us being sure about our own intentions, our own value, and our own responsibility. So let me dive into the energetics a little bit of each of these phrases so that you can kind of understand a little bit more what I was talking about at the beginning, like that the phrases that we use are important. So the energetics, the energy that how it feels in our bodies when we say these certain phrases are as follows. Number 1, I'm trying. What that feels like to me is the energy of frustration, of effort, of confusion. I am trying. I'm trying. What that feels like to me is resistance. What that feels like to me is there's a barrier there. It feels very effortful and it feels very frustrated. I'm trying to figure this out. It feels very confused. It doesn't feel clear at all. When we replace that I'm trying with actually naming the thing that we're doing, that becomes I feel very empowered by that. I feel very clear about it because I'm not stuck in this kind of ambivalent goo of trying. I'm actually saying the thing that I'm doing. So instead of saying I'm trying to manage my time better, okay, so what am I actually doing to manage my time better? And then I'm going to replace the words trying with the effort that I'm actually putting towards making that change. Can you feel in your body the difference between I'm trying and I'm doing? The doing feels solid. The trying feels like trying to grab water. Feels like kind of gooey and like I can't really get a hold of it. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really unclear about it. So this is the difference in energy, the difference in how it feels in your body, and the difference that it is going to feel as you replace these phrases. The I shouldn't, the big feeling that comes up for me is shame. When we use the phrase I shouldn't, what that feels like to me is that whatever the thing is that we're saying that we shouldn't be or shouldn't do, it's like, hide that away. There's so much shame there. I can't let anybody else see that. I can't expose this to anyone. It feels just like, put this in a box, put that lid on tight, and tuck it out of sight. It feels full of shame. It feels, all the shoulds feel full of shame. When we introduce I could, or instead of the I shouldn't, introducing I won't, there's a, when we unshame things and we bring them into the light, a powerful byproduct of that is that we realize that we're not alone, because everybody deals with this stuff. And then we also get to look at whatever the thing is that we're saying that we shouldn't do. We get to look at it through a different lens, where we get to say, I'm so curious about that. I'm curious about why I feel like I shouldn't do these things. I'm curious about why these other people are saying that I shouldn't be like this, or that I shouldn't pursue this thing. And it blows it wide open for exploration and experimentation when we remove the shoulds. The third one, I can't, that one to me just feels like powerlessness. It feels like I'm a victim. It feels like I'm a victim of my circumstances. When I say I can't, I feel like I'm at the mercy of other people. I'm at the mercy of my environment and my circumstances. And when we get to say, instead, I choose not to, you get to take your power back. Again, there's like choice that's introduced there, where you can look clearly at what your circumstances are. This isn't in an attempt to minimize or reduce or ignore our reality, but more so it's able to introduce this realization that we have choice. Now, granted, there are things that I don't think that I would be able to do regardless of the amount of effort that I put into it. So I used to think that if I worked hard enough, that I could be, super good at mathematics, or that I could be really, really good at some of the sciences or physics or whatever. And I do believe that I could exert a great amount of effort to those things and get some level of proficiency, but I don't believe that I could ever be as good at that as someone who has a natural proclivity for those things. So when I say I can't ever be as good at math as so-and-so, that to me doesn't feel like powerlessness or victimy. That just feels like me understanding that there's a limit to my abilities, truly, compared to what someone else can do. And that is a good thing, because God, the world would be so boring if all of us were able to do all the things as well as everybody else. And also, like, I'm not interested in doing those things. So why am I going to exert a great amount of effort to be excellent at those things when I'm not actually interested in them anyway? But the phrase I can't really helps us look at the areas in our lives where we're refusing to put effort in to change, when we know that we could, when we know that there are things that I could do to make things different, and I'm choosing not to. And when we can shift from this mentality of I can't to I'm choosing not to, there's a big shift in our emotions, and there's a big shift in the way that we think about ourselves when we change that up. And the last one that I don't have time, what that feels like in my body is a lack of personal responsibility. That I'm going to say, like, I am at the mercy of everybody else. I'm at the mercy of fate. I'm at the mercy of my circumstances. And it just feels like I'm not taking responsibility for the areas where I really could do something differently. So how do we actually change our minds? That's great if we say, oh, okay, I understand like these 4 phrases. I'm trying, I shouldn't, I can't, I don't have time. And I want to change them because I understand that the way that those phrases make me feel and the way that I feel about my circumstances and feel about myself when I use those phrases is not how I want to feel. Okay, that's great, but how do I actually change my mind? The first step is just awareness. And you already got that just by listening to this episode. So number 1 is to notice that you're saying these things, whether you're saying them out loud or you're saying them on the inside. Notice that you're using these phrases. That's step 1. Notice that you're saying these. And step 2 is notice how it feels. I already walked you through a little bit how these phrases feel like to me in my body when I use them. And I want you to start noticing for yourself, how do you feel when you use these phrases? Do you feel heavy? Do you feel weighted down? Do you feel like your soul, like if your soul was a body, do you feel like your soul feet would feel like lead? That was a really not very eloquent way to describe just the heaviness, I guess, that it feels like to use these phrases. I'm trying. I shouldn't. I can't. I don't have time. These all feel like very heavy weighted phrases to me. It doesn't feel light in my body. It doesn't feel like possibility in my body. So that's how it feels to me when I use those phrases. How does it feel to you? So when you notice that you're saying one of these phrases, or even a phrase that I didn't even mention in this episode, but you notice that it makes you feel a certain way in your body, just, put a little asterisk by that phrase and start paying attention to how those phrases feel. Do they feel heavy? Do they feel really weighty? Do they feel like dead weight? Or do you feel excited and empowered and energized by the phrases that you're using? So that's the first step, is the awareness. Notice that you're using phrases like this and notice how they feel in your body. And number 2 is intention. Determine why you want to change how you're talking and thinking. There are many people that recognize areas where they could make some changes in their lives, and they don't. They don't make changes. I am one of these people from time to time where I know that I need to do something differently, that I could do something differently that would improve my life, or I would feel better in all the ways, and I don't do them. So this is not like there are some people that do, notice these things and they change them. Then there are some people that notice these things and don't change them. I'm saying that we're all in this together. I do believe, though, that there are a higher percentage of people that recognize areas that need to change and then they don't ever do anything about them. So when you become really clear on your intention and why you want to change how you're talking and thinking, this is going to add some fuel to your awareness. This is going to add some motivation to carrying out steps that you put in place for positive change. Now, the question is, this is a good question to ask yourself if you're determining why you want to change, is you can ask yourself this: if I continue to talk like this and feel this way, what is my life going to look like next year? What is my life going to look like in 5 years? What is my life going to look like in 10 years? If I continue to use phrases and language that feel heavy, that feel full of frustration, shame, confusion, powerlessness, like a victim, a lack of personal responsibility, if I keep talking like this, what is my life going to look like in a year, 5 years, 10 years? And my guess is, at best, it will look exactly like it does now. At worst, it will look worse than it is now. We cannot underestimate the power and the impact of our words on our mental, emotional, and physical health. If I want to do the things in the world that feel most aligned with my deep purpose and my goal, this is me personally now. If I want to do things in the world that help reduce human suffering, I can't afford to continue to talk to myself using these terms. I can't continue to use these phrases. Oh God, I just caught myself saying I can't. The awareness piece. Okay, rewind, Morgan. Since I want to have the impact that I want to, since I want to reduce human suffering, that I want to contribute to a reduction in human suffering in the way that most aligns with my deepest purpose and intention, I will not continue to use the phrases that shame me, that bring shame to my purpose and my vision, that bring shame to who I am at my core. I will not continue to use phrases that make me feel powerless to make a positive impact. I won't continue to use phrases that make me feel like I'm a victim of my circumstances. I'm committed to changing those phrases because I believe that the work that I am doing in the world is important. How about for you? What kinds of things do you want to do in the world? Who do you want to be in the world? What type of parent do you want to be? What type of partner do you want to be? What type of leader do you want to be that requires you to think differently? And if you're going to do that, these are some of the phrases that you can be aware of. So once we have intention, once we determine why we want to change how we're thinking and talking, we can take action. There are just two things that I have that are really very practical, very, very practical. One of them is to have cues. So the two that I wrote down, to have visual cues and, electronic cues. So visual cues could be sticky notes. Visual cues can be a wallpaper on your phone where you are writing yourself notes, giving yourself visual reminders that how you talk and how you talk to others and how you talk to yourself is important. That even the way, pay attention to the people that you listen to. How are they talking? How are they talking about their goals? How are they talking about their purpose? How are they talking about their vision for their lives? And I would recommend that if people are consistently speaking in a way that doesn't help you feel hopeful and full of possibility, that you limit the amount of time that you're listening to those people. And I don't mean necessarily even the people that are directly in your life, because sometimes you can't help it. What I am talking about is like, what is your diet, your, technological diet, the social media, the podcasts, the books that you read, the videos that you watch. So be very careful about what you are bringing into your awareness and what is contributing to how you're speaking to yourself and to others. So the visual cues, the sticky notes, the wallpaper on your phone, to remind you to be cognizant and aware of the words that you're using, the language you're using. And then you also could do something really practically, like set an alarm on your phone to bring yourself back into awareness of these things. You can, for a little while when I was in a state of, high stress, I would set 3 alarms in the day, one in, late morning, early afternoon, and early evening, just to give myself a moment to come back to the present moment, to take a pause in whatever I was doing, take some big breaths, almost bring like this just really simple, short meditative state where I brought myself back into the present moment. I got awareness back into my body. How am I feeling in these moments? Kind of checking in all over the place, bring myself back into alignment. So something like that, where you just have some very obvious and intentional cues throughout your day to bring yourself back to awareness of the present moment and awareness around how you're speaking and how you're thinking. The other action that you can take is to develop some habits that help you pay attention more. So journaling is a fantastic one. The way that, having like a daily journal practice, I think is great. And the thing that has worked for me really, really well, because I have gone through spurts where I keep a journal every day, but I haven't done that consistently over a super long period of time. But what has helped me more so is doing like a brain dump. Another way to in tandem is to do automatic writing. So that's, you get out a piece of paper and you set a timer and you don't allow yourself to stop writing the entire time. Even if you're writing the phrase, I don't know what to write right now. I'm not really sure what to write. I still have 5 minutes left on my timer and I don't know what to write. Because what you're doing is you're opening up the doorway to your subconscious mind. And that's where you get to see the language and the verbiage that's running beneath your conscious awareness. Sometimes I have been really surprised by what comes out during my brain dumps or my automatic writing. So I would be like, oh, I did not know that I was thinking like that. I didn't know that I was talking internally like this about this situation or about this person or about myself. I didn't know. So sometimes it's not until you can actually see it on paper that you recognize phrases that you are saying that you don't want to continue to say. Another way is to set your intentions. So when you are in the kind of groggy wake up state in the morning, it's a great time to set your intentions for the day. So you can have a morning mantra or just a moment of mindfulness where you get dialed in again on your purpose and you commit yourself that day to activities, to a mindset that contributes to you leaning into your purpose and living out your purpose. It's also a good time to do that as you're falling asleep. So it's like an easier way to tap into these different brain states. And then think about what phrases you may say as a replacement. So I've given you a handful of them. As I've told you, instead of saying I shouldn't, you could say I could when I won't. Instead of saying I don't have time, you can say I won't make time, or just I don't want to. I'm choosing to do something else to do with my time. So to when you recognize a word or a phrase that doesn't sit well in your body, that feels heavy to you, to intentionally pick a different phrase so that when you say that phrase and you catch yourself saying it, you have one to replace it with. And some of this is going to happen in the moment. I mean, you had a really clear picture into seeing me catch myself saying a phrase that I don't want to say and choosing different verbiage to use instead. This is not, or it feels like it's not a big deal. It feels like the things that we say, the words that we use, like, who cares? It's not a big deal, right? But we know that this is not true. We know it's not true because we know what it feels like when other people use phrases and words that suck to hear, or phrases or words that make us feel small and make us feel insignificant and make us feel icky. We know that it's obvious. It's more obvious for us to pick that out when someone is saying those things to us. And very frequently we are just kind of blind to the ways that we use these phrases ourselves to ourselves. And if we are catching ourselves saying them out loud, it's a pretty good indication that we are also saying those things to ourselves. The internal dialogue is way more important than anything that anybody else could say to us. I'm not saying that the things that other people say to us are not important. I'm not saying that at all, because it is very important. But what we say to ourselves is vastly more important. if there is a woman who doesn't believe that she's attractive, it doesn't matter how many people tell her that she's attractive if she doesn't believe that inside herself. So this is an inside job. And it also is really important for us to recognize the way that we're talking, recognize especially the way that we talk about our past and the way that we talk about our future. Is it full of compassion? Is it full of hope? Is it full of understanding our personal responsibility? Is it full of an awareness that we are all parts of a bigger picture here, that we are all in this together? Is the language that we're using divisive? Is the language that we're using hateful? Is the language that we're using cutting other people down? Anytime we catch ourselves using phrases that don't feel good in our bodies, it's a good indication that it's time for us to reevaluate the language that we're using. So are the things that we're saying important? Of course, because our language shapes our perspectives. Our language shapes the things that we feel like we're able to do in the world. And if you are someone who feels a deep sense of purpose, it is really important for you to get a grip on this. It's really valuable for you to do some work to notice the types of things that you're saying. So again, those 4 are: I'm trying, I shouldn't, I can't, I don't have time. If you think of some other phrases, feel free to send them to me. I would love to hear from you. And if you catch yourself saying these and you are noticing how different you feel when you replace those phrases, I also would love to hear how that's going for you. I'm not going to be perfect at this. I won't ever be perfect at this. And I can always get better. Can always get better at this. I want to make sure that I am speaking in a way that uplifts and encourages other people, and that I am acutely aware of the way that I talk to myself as well. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the PS We Expire podcast. I hope that these 4 phrases are helpful to you as you become more mindful, as you want to just continue to develop more depth and compassion and empathy for yourself in your journey. If these episodes of this podcast have been helpful to you, will you please just share them with your friends and family? If you have found something that has affected you in a positive way and you want someone else to experience that, just share an episode with them, share a clip with them. And as always, before we go, P.S.